Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. In the previous video we learned about class. Classes are a very important topic, okay? So after function, if you go in object oriented programming, you should know what classes are. In the previous video we learned how we can define class, what is the init function, how you can use some variable for that object. We also learned about creating method or functions. We also looked at one another special function that is called str function, that will say when we print an object, it will give some special or a very clean message of what that object represents. So we have learned how we can create an object, what objects are, how we can access the variable of an object, and how changing the variables of one doesn't impact the others. And we also learned how we can call the methods or the function. Today we'll be learning about two type of variable that we used. So yes, in the previous class we used two variables, right? One here without the self keyword and one using the self keyword. So today we'll be learning what is the difference between them. Okay. So in class or in the object oriented programming, when you define a class, there are two type of variables. One is called the class variable and one is called the instance variable. Let's take an example and I'll show you what is the difference and how we define it. Suppose let's take an example of a circle. Okay, suppose let's create a class called circle. So to find an area of a circle of the perimeter, you need to know what is the value of pi, and pi is a constant. Suppose we define pi equals to 3.14. Then we give an init function. You know what is the init function? This is the function that runs automatically when we create an object of it, right? Self dot and the first argument that goes in any functions inside a class is self, and second is the radius. So this is how we say that we need to know the radius of it, self dot radius. So how we are writing this, I've talked this in a previous class, right? So we say that when we create a class, we can create method inside it, and the very important or the special method that is called init is the one that is called automatically when an object is created using this blueprint or this class. Okay, now if you create an object, suppose we are creating an object called circle1. Okay, circle1, and we'll create the circle, and in the radius we'll pass 10. Okay, now if you have watched the previous class, you know this 10 will go as radius, and now you can access this radius using this circle1 dot radius. For example, let's do something like print circle1 dot radius. Okay, now if you run this, see, we'll be getting 10. Here 10 is the radius because 10 is what we define. Now let's come to what are the class variables and instance variables. So any variables that are defined outside a function. So this is a function or method, right? Any variable that are defined outside a function are called class variable. So here this is class variable. So what are class variable? Class variables are defined outside function. Class variable are defined outside functions or methods. Any functions inside classes are called methods. So class variables are defined outside functions or methods. So that is why this pi here, right? This is the class variable. Why? Because you see this is not inside a function, right? This is inside a function. So we say instance variable. This is instance variable. Instance variable. And what are instance variable? Instance variable are defined inside method. Instance variable are defined inside methods. So this is the main difference. The first difference that is between them is that class variables are defined outside function. That is, it does not need a function to be defined. And instance variable are defined inside method. And when we want to define any variable inside method, we use this self keyword. So why is the name instance? Because when we create an object, this is called instance of this blueprint or the class, right? That is why we call them an instance variable. And why we call this class variable? Because they are not part of one instance. They are part of class as a whole. Now let's come to the second difference that is between them is, so when you define any variable as a class variable, right, this will be part of all the instance created using this blueprint or this class. Suppose let's create one more circle called circle2, circle2, and we'll create one more circle and we'll pass the radius of 12. Okay, so now here the radius will be 12, right? It won't be 10 this time. The previous circle had 10, but this time it will be 12. Let me show you. Okay, you understand this in a better way. So let me print this once again. See, first you see 10, then you see 12, right? You don't see 10 for both of them. So that is the first difference. So in instance variable, right, whatever you pass to that function or to pass this class, right, that will be part of that instance only. So here it will be part of only circle1 instance and circle2 instance. But what you defined in a class variable, right, this will be part of all the instance. For example, let me show you. So now after the radius, if you run the pi, okay, so you can access this the class variable using the instance also. Why? Because this instance will all take up all the class variable among themselves also. So that will be at some default values for all instance created for this class. Let me show you. So if you write here pi, okay, and write here also pi, and run this, see, you get 3.14, 3.14 for both of them. So that is the second difference. The second difference is class variable are being instantiated to all the objects of it, or all the instance of the class will have this class variable. But when you define an instance variable, right, instance variable are only part of that instance. So let me put a difference here. Instance variable are part of that particular instance, and you say class variable are part of all instance. So when this is the second difference, okay, the first difference is class are defined outside function and instance variable inside a function. But what is the second difference? The most important difference is instance variable are part of that particular instance, okay, that it's part of particular instance. So suppose here you saw this 10, right, this radius is only for circle 1. For circle 2 the radius will change because we pass a different number. But for the class variable, right, this will be part of all instance. So when we printed this circle1.py and circle2.py, right, you saw both of them have the same variable or same value, that is 3.14. So that is the second and most important things to know. What is the difference between class variable and instance variable? Now if you want to use them, you can use them simply. Suppose we want to create an area, right, so we'll say get area, and we can run something like return. So we know what is how to find an area, and you know when you define a function, the first argument should always be self. And what is the area? Area is self pi r square, right? So we'll do self.pi into power. We have learned our power, right? Self.radius square. Now let's print the area, okay? So we'll say print area of circle 1. And how you can do that? You can do circle 1. So yes, in previous class we learned, okay, how we can have access. You can do circle 1 dot get area, and run this. Now let's put it for the second circle also. So here we'll do circle 2, and here we'll do circle 2 dot get area. Now if you run this, see, for circle 1 is 314 and this is 452 square of unit. So now we have learned how to get access, right? Access of this pi for all instance. There is also one more way to get access. So this is how we accessing variable. So this is how you access instance variable, right? So for class variable, what you can do, you can access using the same instance also, right? Here we saw class instance dot pi. So if you want to access one more way, there is also accessing class variable. What you can do? You can do print. You can write name of the class. What is the name of the class? Circle. Dot. What is the variable? Pi. You can access it this way also. Now if I let's comment out all of them and run this once again. See, you still get the 3.14. So in the previous class you saw when we use the self heated, what we did, we access the heated and using this class way. You use the class name and use the heated and put it inside this self.heated. Even though we did not did this in the previous class, right, still this instance of this class will have this self.heated. I did this so that you don't get confused like how we get access. I wanted to clear that up in today's class. That's why in the previous class I have used that as an instance variable. But now you saw that when we define any class variable, right, all the instance of this class will receive this as a variable of their own. Now what is the difference of using an instance variable and class variable? Now let me show you one more difference. Okay, one more difference is, suppose now we have defined two, right, circle 1 and circle 2. Now if you do something like this, So circle 1 dot radius equals to 0. Suppose you define something like this, okay? Circle 1 dot radius equals to 0, and now you do print of circle 1. So now we want to get the radius. The previous one was, okay, we'll put the before and after, okay? So this is before we do any calculation. The second line will be after we do the calculation, okay? Let's run this. So you see, area of circle 1 is 314, and now area becomes 0. Why? Because we made this circle 1 radius equals to 0, okay? Now what happens? Does it change for circle 2? Let's see for circle 2, and let's run this. Now we have changed only the radius for circle 1, right? So will it have any impact on circle 2? Take a pause and think what the answer should be. We have learned about this in the previous class, okay? Okay, let's run this once again. See, we say area of circle 2 does not get impacted. Only circle 1 became 0, but 2 did not become 0. But what happens if you change the class variable? So if you do something like this, circle dot pi equals to 0. Okay, now what do you think will happen when you do once more? You do the same thing. So let's copy this and put it here. Let's comment this out, and let's do one more. Let's print it once again here. So this is before, okay? The above one will be before. Then we change this class variable to 0, and let's see what the answer is. See, before it was printing something, but second time it changed to 0. So that is most important thing when dealing with classes, class variable, and you should be very careful. If you change the class variable, right, this variable will be changed for all the instance of it that you access after changing the variable. So now here you change the variable of this class, right? Now every instance of this class will have this change. But when you did change only for an instance variable, right, like here the radius, it only changed for that particular instance. It did not change for the all the instances. But when you change it for only the class, right, it will change for all the objects that the class that is dependent on that class. So that is also one more very important decision you need to make when working with class variable. You see, when you change the class variable, it will change for all the instances of that class. Okay, now you don't, this is not a good way, okay? Not a proper way to do, not recommended, okay? So if you wanted to change the class variable, then you can create functions or method inside this. So we know when we create a method, we write something like diff. So we'll say change pi, okay? And here we pass self, right? And we do self. Suppose we wanted to change the class name, and we know how do we access it? We access it using circle dot pi, and we want to change it to 0. Suppose this is the what we wanted to do, okay? Now, but if you wanted to do it for class, right? So there is one method called class method. It's a decorator, right? We will learn with decorator. Decorator is if you wanted to learn something before and after a function run, then you can use the decorator. So there is a special decorator called class method. This is specifically for classes, okay? And what they do, this now you don't need to pass self now, because this is, you say it's a class method. It's not part of any instance, but it's a class method. So instead of self, you need to pass class, and this will have different variable than what the self have, okay? And here now what you can do, you can use class dot pi equals to 0. So this line, this one, right, and this line is the same thing, but this is not recommended and this is the recommended one. Now let's comment this out and do the same thing, okay? Now what we'll do, we'll call this circle dot change pi and let's run this once again. If you see, still print the same thing. So what you can do, if you wanted to change a variable, right, you don't directly access the variable using the class name. You can create a function, and here the function will be a little bit different than other function, because here it won't take the self, but it will take the class. Let's do one thing, let's print this class, okay? Let's print this class so that we know that there is a difference of when we are using the variable. It's not just we are changing the name, but there is a difference. So we'll do print self, okay? Now let's do one thing. Let's call this once. We'll not call anything else. We'll just be calling this. First, this is class, and let's do circle one dot circle one dot get area. Okay. Now here both of them will return something, but we are just printing out some things. If you see, it's a class main of circle, and this is a class object, right? It's part of an object. It does not. This is only for an object. It will print the related to an object. But when you do a class, right? It's not printing only for an object. It's printing as a class as a whole. So this self and class has a very different way of doing things. When you type self, this is for an object of a circle. But when you do using the class method, right? This class is not for an object. It's for a circle as a whole. So that is the main difference between using class method and not using class method. So we don't use class method when we want to do it for an instance. But if you wanted to do it for a class as a whole, then you can use this decorator called class method. And here you don't pass self, you pass class. You can name it anything as I said, but it's passed a class because we know, because here now the things will be related to class, not an instance of class. Now you can access the variables using the class dot and the variable name, and you can change it here itself. So this is the recommended way of doing thing. Okay. So the previous one that we used, circle.py equals to 0, this is not recommended. So this is recommended way. Okay. So that is one more difference. Now there is also a mutability factor coming here. So let's do one thing. So there is this is the last one. Okay. So it's a mutability factor. So we have learned about mutability when we learned about list and all that, right? So we said the lists are mutable. That is, if you change, it will start changing for everyone. So if you pass to a function, if you change inside the function, still the original one will get changed. But this does not happen for string, numbers and all of that. So same thing will come here also. Okay, let's do one thing. Inside this py, let's pass one more. And we'll call this, let's call it a list 1. Okay. And this is a list. So let's say this is mutable, right? You know that list is a mutable and this is immutable, right? So when you passed immutable, you saw if you changed, it changed for a class as a whole, and every time it does not change. Okay. So when you change it using this circle 1.py, right, then it did not change. Okay, let's do one more thing. While explaining this, let's do the immutability also once more. So now we have learned about creating instance, right? We have two instances, circle 1 and circle 2. Let's do one thing. First, let's do circle 1 dot py. You know, it will have access to all the variable equals to 1. Okay. Now let's do print get area. So we'll do circle 1 dot get area. So let's run this. We need to remove the print. Okay. We'll remove the print from here, and we'll remove it from here also, and run this once again. Let's do one thing. Let's bring this all below so that it becomes easier to do. Okay, so we created two more classes. Okay, two more instances of these classes, one with the radius 10, one is radius 12. Now what we did, using the first circle, we changed the py to 1. So what do you think? Did it change for the whole class? No, it will not change the whole class because we did not use the name of the class.py, right? We are changing only for the instance, and we know instance have access to all the class variable also. Now when you run this, so you'll get as 10. Why? Because it's pi r square and 10 square is equals to 100. And if you do for circle 2, you should be getting the different one. Why? Because it did not change for that instance, right? It changed only for the circle 1 instance. Here we get 452. But you know, 12 square is 144. That means 3.14 is getting still added here. Okay. But what happened if you make some changes on the list? So we have added one list here, right? So if you go to the top in the definition of circle, you see we added one list called list 1. Let's do one thing. Let's create in the list 1. Let's make some changes in list 1. So this is for the immutable type. Okay. Immutable class variable. Okay, this is what we did for immutable class variable. Now let's comment all of them and do for the list part. So here it's for the mutable, and we know inside the mutable list there is one called list1, right? So there is something called list1. So we'll append some things, right? Okay, we'll append 100. Okay, we appended using only circle1. Okay, in here let's comment out this and we'll print the list1. We'll just print circle1 dot list1, and similarly we'll do for list2. What do you think the changes will be coming here? In the previous we saw when we change it for one instance, it only changed for circle1, but it did not change for circle2. But this time we are not changing the pi was the number, but this time we are changing a list. We are appending something for 100 only for the circle1. We are not doing for circle2. And what do you think this will be printing for circle2? So take a pause and think what the solution can be. Let's run this. If you see, it got 100 for both of them. So that is one more important problem here. So whenever you define a class variable, try to keep it immutable. If you want some mutable, make it an instance variable so that it only changes for one instance. It does not change for the class as a whole. So let me show you an example. Okay. Suppose inside a class, when we define it, then we'll have one more called list2. Let's say self dot list2 equals to empty array. Okay. So for both of them, since the naming will be same for both of them, here also we'll keep the name same for both of them. Okay. Now let's print something list2 for both of them. So here list2 for both of them without doing any changes for now. Okay. And let's run this. First we saw when we appended only for one, this is a class variable. Okay. This is for class variable. For class variable. And we saw we get appended for both of them. But for the second time, let's only do it for one more time, the same thing. Okay. This time we'll do for instance variable. Instead of list1, we'll do for list2. And this is part of instance variable. And let's run this. See, this time only 3 of them got 100. First 2 is for the first one, that is for class variable. Second time it did not do it for circle2, because this time list2 is part of instance variable. It's not part of a class as a whole. So there is a main difference. And what you should do, use mutable type only. Use mutable type only for class variable if you don't want it to be updated for all instance. Okay. So this is one more thing. Try using mutable type as instance variable. And you know why I said this, right? Because we saw here, if it's part of a class as a whole, changing from one instance also impact other instance. But if it's in part of instance variable, changing for one instance doesn't impact other instance. So yeah, that is all the things I wanted to say you about what is the difference between class variable and instance variable. Let's take a recap once again. Okay. So what is the first difference that you can see directly when you see a class and you see all the definition? The first thing, how you can know what is class variable, instance variable? Anything that is defined inside method. Okay. And it does not have to be defined only inside init, but it's mostly defined inside unit, because we know init will run in the first case and you want all the variable to be done in the first one, but you can do it here also. Okay. You can do self dot name is equals to let's code together. Okay. If you run something like this, this will also give you the same thing. So let's see this. So now if you create this circle, okay, this circle one, and now if you print this, or you need to call this function now, because when we call this function, then only this name will get initialized, right? So why we define this inside init is because we know this will get or call automatically, so everything will be defined in the first instance itself. But now if you want to get this self dot name, right, you need to call this function. So we'll do circle one dot area dot get area. Now you can do print. Now if you run this, so you'll be getting let's code together, right? So you can define it inside any method, but it's recommended that do it inside the init, because you know init will be called automatically. You don't have to call that particular function for something to be defined. Okay. So instance variable can be defined inside any methods. Okay, it doesn't have to be inside init, but it's recommended to put it in it because init will be called as soon as the instance is created and all the variables will get set up. And second, we learn what are class variable. Class variable which are not defined inside any methods. So it is defined directly inside the class as a whole, not inside any method. And what is the first difference? First difference is this one. The second difference is how we access a variable. So accessing variable, for accessing class variable, you can access using the instance also. Since all the instance will have this class variable, so you can access them. And there is also one way of accessing, that is using the name of the class dot and the name of the variable. So this is one more way of accessing the variable. You can access it using the instance also. Instance will have access to this, both of them, but you can access using the name of the classes also. Then we have one more difference. When you change the variable, right, when you change the variable of an instance variable, it will only change for that instance. But when you do a change using for the class variable, right, then it will change for the all the instance as a whole. Now there are two ways to do it. One is calling the circle.py, there is a class name dot the name of the variable and assigning some number, different number to it. But there is also a better way, that is calling this, making a function. Here when you make a function, you need to put a decorator of class method, so the Python understand that this is for a class exclusive and we need to change thing for class, not an instance. If you don't use this class method, right, then you need to do self, and self.py will only change for that instance, it won't change for a class as a whole. So you need to decorate using class method and you can change it here, and the result will be same, it will change for all the instance of it. And then now there is also one more thing, it's called mutability factor. So in a class variable, you can put any variable, you can put integer, list, dictionary, but it's recommended to put only integer or string that are immutable. Why? Because when you put an immutable type, right, suppose you put immutable type, okay, so when you put immutable type and we change it, it does not impact, right? So for the all the instance, it just changes automatically, and when we change it using the instance variable, it only changes for the particular instance. Like for circle 1, we change the pi to 1, this will only change for circle 1. But when we do it using mutable, right, like list or dictionary, even if you change only for that instance, right, here for circle 1 we change only for circle 1, but this got appended for circle 2 also. So when we printed, you saw this 100 will be coming for both of them. So what is a better way to do? Make it instance variable, make all the mutable type instance variable, so that it only changes for that instance but not for all the instances of it. Okay, so it's recommended use mutable type for class variable and immutable type as an instance variable. So that was the difference between mutable and immutable type in Python. I hope you understood the basic concept of it. In the previous class, I did not say you when we did accessing like this, what are mutable, immutable, and why I wrote self.heater and directly I put the class variable instead of saying that this class variable already this instance has access, because I wanted you to understand what is the difference between class variable and instance variable. Okay, so I hope you got the concept. Now you know what to use where. So if you want something to be default to all instance, use a class variable, but it's like don't forget that you can't use mutable type. You can use, but just be knowing that if you change anything for any instance, it will change for all other instances also. So yeah, that was it for today. Let's see all the changes and push it to GitHub. Git status, and we'll do git add all, and we'll do git commit. And what did we learn today? We learned about class variable versus instance variable. Okay, let's push this and let's push it to GitHub. Git push origin main. This should get pushed. Now if you click on this link, today is lecture 17, so let's go to 17 class instance variable, and here you can see all the changes. So yeah, that was it for today. I hope you understood the concept. If you are facing any difficulties, please comment out. We also made one Telegram discussion group, you can join there and we can have a chat if you have any problem. So yeah, that was it for today. Thank you for watching. See you in the next.